In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know.
Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? This is a reality we simply have to accept. Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you. As always, thank you for tuning in to another edition of In the Know. I'm your host, Tony Reeves. Let's get pop locking. So I want to talk to you about what it means in terms of the power of being the first. I've talked about this too in previous editions about understanding what it means when people have to adapt to a different culture. But one of the things that we often lose sight of is, what does it mean when you're the first? Like, it's one thing, and I'm not talking about being the first from your college or the first from your family to do something. I'm talking about first in terms of who you are culturally in that space. Meaning, if you're the first woman in this particular space, or you're the first Indian, or the first indigenous, first Asian, first African American, whatever the case may be. So many times we focus on and we celebrate what it means to be the first, that we don't think about what it means to be the first. Now, the nice part is that we like to believe, and we'd like to convince ourselves that, especially in today's day and age, that we have moved to a point of having such a culturally diverse, dynamic population that anytime somebody moves into a new space where they are the first, it should not be traumatic. It should not be any heavy lifting. We should be able to say, hey, congratulations, thank you for being here. Let's make it do what it do. The hard reality is you have to take a step back and ask yourself this question. If this person is the first of who they are in that space, what was the space like before they got there? And see, the reality is that if you are used to the space being a particular way, meaning it's catered to a very, and this is where people kind of get upset, because they think, well, there's nothing special about it. See, the problem is that when you're used to something being the norm, it never feels special to you. So if you're in an environment, let's say you're in an environment where it's all guys, and then all of a sudden as a woman is introduced, in your mind, you're thinking to yourself, well, nothing's catered. No, it's not that it's catered. It's the norm is that the environment is all guys. So that means you move a certain way when you're around each other. You engage a certain way when you're around each other. Your expressions, your interactions, the coding in terms of how you speak. There's so many things you do when you know there's another guy that you don't think about when there's a woman there. So all of a sudden, when a woman is introduced, you have a couple of different phenomena that present themselves. You have this situation where you may feel like I'm going to be resistant to making any type of change in my behavior because I'm not going to change who I am because there's a woman here. Nobody's asking you to do that, but you should at least have the wherewithal to be mindful of the fact that because this person is not used to the culture that you've established there, that they may have to adapt in ways that you don't have to adapt to. My mother once told me this story. She talked to me about how she was her group of teachers were the first group of teachers to teach an integrated kindergarten class. And this was back 72, 73, back in my home state of Arkansas in the Deep South. Well, think about how powerful that is for a second. That means all teachers before my mother taught students that look like them. That meant all the white teachers taught white students, all the black teachers taught black students. So for the first time, she and her colleagues were teaching a mixture of students. So that means my mom's first class as a black woman had black students and white students, and her white colleagues had black students and white students. And in terms of their interaction with each other, my mom's interaction with her fellow colleagues, that may have been one thing, but think about the power of this. Meaning there were parents now who probably found themselves in this unique position of now there's a good chance that you're going to go and engage a teacher. And, if they're 5, the parents are more likely going to be in their 20s, whatever the case may be, but they're going to be engaging teachers who are now responsible for educating their children with a child that may not look like their child. And I ran the joke past her where I asked her, I said, did you get any type of training materials as to how to adapt to that environment? Because prior to that, everybody only taught students that look like them. And my mom's response was, nope. But I asked her if she had any problems. She said, no, parents didn't give me any grief. I didn't have any conflict. None of those things occurred. She said, I was able to move accordingly. And, fortunately, the parents for black students were just as engaging as the parents for white students. Now, in my mom's case, it worked out well. Teaching, she was educating kids at the same manner. She wasn't treating them any differently. She literally was engaging the children just as they were. Children. But the reality is that my mom literally came out of a system that was segregated. We're talking the Jim Crow South. We're talking about parts of our country that literally did not want black children and white children to be studying together. Remember, her first class was in 1973, 74, if I remember correctly. Brown v. Board was 1954. It took 20 years to get to a point where they were comfortably, and I use that word comfortable loosely, but they now were able to allow for that measure of engagement within two populations of kids, black kids and white kids, with teachers that were either black or white. That had never happened before. And the thing that was even powerful is that even though my mother and her group of teachers were the first, no one prepared them for what they were going to face. My mom may not have remembered, it's been a number of years. She retired several years back. So after teaching 30 plus years. So she may not have remembered, but I'm pretty confident that if she stopped and thought about it, there were probably a few funky experiences, but she honestly said no, she didn't have any. She was fortunate. But how many teachers do you think out there who found themselves in that same situation could say the same? How many white teachers found themselves dealing with black parents, or how many black teachers dealt with white parents who were not overly moved by the fact that their children were being educated with children that didn't look like theirs? And there was no plan in place for how to educate those teachers accordingly. Again, we celebrate what those kids are going through. We celebrate this multicultural society, but we don't think about the impact on the teachers who are now being put in a position that they were not properly or trained to have to deal. The reality is they knew how to teach. The reality is it doesn't matter if it's black kids or white kids. They knew how to teach. What they didn't know is how to deal with the potential conflict that may come from dealing with parents who didn't want them teaching their children. And again, I say this to stress the fact that sometimes what happens in our pursuit of celebrating people being the first to do something, we often overlook the fact that not only are them being the first means they're the first to do it, that means they're the first to experience all of the headaches, all of the cultural nuance, all of the things, both good and bad, that comes with that experience. So as much as we celebrate them being the first, if you have the opportunity to be around somebody who is in a position of being the first, also be there to support them being the first, because that support is just as important as the celebration, and that will go a long way. All right, everyone. Again, thank you for tuning in to another edition of In the Know. As always, you can find me on AnthonyReeves.com. And as always, I must stress this in my show with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?